Everyone has heard that fermented cabbage can be good for the gut, but almost nobody talks about the type of cabbage that may contain several times more antioxidant compounds than ordinary green cabbage. And do you know why? Because most people walk right past it in the grocery store. They see the deep purple leaves, assume it is exotic, expensive, or difficult to cook, and reach for the familiar green head instead. But that overlooked cabbage contains anthocyanins, the same protective pigments found in dark berries, and studies have found that its antioxidant capacity can be several times higher than that of white cabbage. The problem is that one common cooking mistake can send much of its colour and some of its valuable compounds straight into the water, and most people make that mistake every time they cook it. Today I will show you which cabbage I am talking about, why its colour matters, and how to cook it without draining away the very compounds that make it special. If you are over 50, this matters even more. You may be trying to eat more vegetables for digestion, weight control, heart health, or simply because you want food that supports your body instead of working against it. But raw cabbage may leave you bloated, and cabbage cooked for too long may lose colour, texture, and part of what made it valuable. There is a better middle ground. You do not have to eat a giant raw salad. You do not need expensive cookware, and you do not need to become a food chemist. You only need to change 5 moments: how you cut the cabbage, how long you let it rest, how much water you use, how long you cook it, and what you add after the heat is turned off. Near the end, I will show you the finishing trick that makes the whole method click. It uses a common ingredient that may already be sitting in your refrigerator door or spice cabinet. First, one clear note. This video is educational and is not medical advice. Cabbage can be part of a healthy diet, but it does not cure disease and it does not replace treatment from your doctor. If you have thyroid disease, kidney disease, digestive illness, severe food intolerance, or you follow a medically restricted diet, use this information as general guidance and speak with a qualified professional about your own needs. Now think about how cabbage is usually cooked in an American kitchen. You bring home a head because it costs less than many other vegetables and lasts longer than lettuce. You cut it in half. You shred it. Maybe you leave it on the counter while you answer a call, finish the meat, or wait for the oven. Then you fill a pot with water. The cabbage goes in. 10 minutes pass. It still looks firm, so you keep going. Another 10 minutes. The kitchen begins to smell unmistakably like boiled cabbage. That smell feels like proof. Now it must be done. You drain the pot. The water is greenish, yellowish, or purple. You season the cabbage and serve it. Nothing about this feels careless. It is exactly how many people were taught to cook vegetables, but every step changes what remains in the food. Cabbage contains vitamin C, which dissolves in water and is sensitive to heat. It also contains a family of natural sulfur compounds called glucosinolates. These are found in cruciferous vegetables such as cabbage, broccoli, kale, mustard greens, radishes, and Brussels sprouts. Cabbage also contains an enzyme called myrosinase. The easiest way to understand this is to imagine 2 ingredients stored in separate rooms inside the plant cell. One room holds glucosinolates, the other holds myrosinase. As long as the cell remains intact, they do not interact very much. Then the knife comes down, the cell walls break, the door opens. Myrosinase meets glucosinolates and helps transform them into other compounds, including isothiocyanates. That is why cutting and chewing matter. Part of the useful chemistry begins on the cutting board, but enzymes are sensitive to heat. Strong or prolonged heating can reduce myrosinase activity. At the same time, boiling pulls water-soluble substances out of the cabbage and into the cooking liquid. So when you shred cabbage, drop it immediately into a large pot of boiling water. Keep it there until every piece is completely soft, and then discard the liquid. You combine several losses at once. Heat, time, water, drainage. That is the pattern that causes the damage, not cooking itself. Cooked cabbage is not useless. Let me say that again because people often swing from one extreme to the other. Cooked cabbage is not useless. Cooking can make it softer, warmer, sweeter, easier to chew, and more comfortable for someone who does not tolerate a large amount of raw fibre. For many adults over 50, that is a real advantage. The problem is not heat. The problem is unnecessary heat. The first habit to change is when you cut the cabbage. Do not shred it hours before cooking and leave it exposed. Once cut, the edges begin losing moisture. The texture changes. The aroma develops. The fresh sweetness slowly fades. That does not mean you must cut it at the exact second the pan is ready. A short rest after cutting may be useful because cutting already brought myrosinase and glucosinolates into contact. Cut the cabbage, then prepare the pan. Chop the onion, measure the herbs, warm the water. 10 or 15 minutes is a practical kitchen pause, not 3 hours, not all afternoon. A pause. The cut and wait method has been studied more clearly with broccoli than with every type of cabbage, so do not treat the exact number of minutes like a prescription. The useful idea is simple. Give the plant chemistry a short head start before strong heat arrives. The next habit is the size of the cut. Uneven cabbage cooks unevenly. If half the pieces are paper thin and the other half are thick chunks, the thin ribbons will collapse while the thick pieces remain hard. Then you keep cooking everything because the largest pieces are not ready. By the time the large pieces soften, the small ones have surrendered. Cut the cabbage as evenly as you can. For a quick skillet dish, thin ribbons work well because they cook fast. For steaming, slightly wider strips hold their shape. For soup, small squares are fine, but they should go into the pot later. A sharp knife helps. A dull knife crushes and tears. A sharp knife gives you cleaner cuts, better control, and less frustration. The greatest mistake, though, is the water. Vitamin C is water-soluble. Some glucosinolates can move into cooking liquid too. If you make soup and eat the broth, those compounds have not simply disappeared. Some may be in the liquid you consume. But if you boil cabbage in a large pot and pour the water away, the sink gets part of the meal. You can see the evidence. The water changes colour. It gains aroma. With red cabbage, it may turn purple or blue. That colour came from the vegetable. This is why steaming is often a better choice when your goal is to keep more inside the cabbage. Steam surrounds the vegetable with heat, but the cabbage is not swimming in water. The cooking time is usually shorter. The texture stays better. The colour stays brighter. And the kitchen does not smell as if a cabbage factory opened in the next room. Here is the simplest steaming method. Slice the cabbage evenly. Let it rest briefly while the water heats. Place it in a steamer basket or metal colander above simmering water. Cover it. Then check early. You are not waiting for complete collapse. You are looking for cabbage that has softened but still gives a little resistance when you bite it. That slight bite matters. It tells you that you stopped before the vegetable lost all structure. Thinly sliced cabbage may need only a few minutes. Thicker pieces take longer. The variety matters too. Savoy cabbage softens faster than dense green cabbage. Napa cabbage cooks faster still. Red cabbage usually holds its shape longer, so do not worship the timer. Use it as a reminder to check. Colour gives you another clue. Green cabbage should still look alive. Red cabbage should remain vivid. If it turns dull, watery and exhausted, you went too far. Long cooking also changes the smell. Cabbage contains sulfur compounds. As heating continues, more volatile sulfur aromas develop and escape. That familiar strong smell is not proof that the cabbage is ready. It often means the pot has been working longer than necessary. If the smell reaches the front door before your family does, turn off the stove. Now, people often say steamed cabbage tastes boring. Steaming is not the problem. Bland seasoning is. Cabbage loves herbs and seeds. Dill can brighten it. Caraway gives it a warm, earthy note. Coriander seed adds a light citrus character. Fennel changes the aroma and can make the dish feel less heavy. Mustard seed adds bite. Thyme works beautifully with butter or olive oil. Parsley gives freshness at the end. Fresh dill and parsley are best added after cooking or during the final minute. Their aroma disappears quickly under prolonged heat. Harder spices, such as caraway, coriander, fennel or mustard seed, can be warmed briefly in the pan before the cabbage goes in. Briefly. The goal is to release aroma, not create black seeds and regret. A little fat helps too. Olive oil, avocado oil, or a small amount of butter can carry the flavour of herbs and make cabbage more satisfying. But cabbage should not float in grease. If the pan looks like deep-fried confetti, the oil has taken over the recipe. For many American households, a skillet is more practical than a steamer. That is fine. Quick sautéing can preserve texture and create better flavour than boiling. Use a wide pan. A wide pan gives moisture room to escape. A narrow pot traps steam and encourages the cabbage to stew in its own liquid. Warm the pan over medium heat. Add a small amount of oil. If you are using seeds, warm them for a few seconds until you smell them. Add the cabbage. Toss it. Then add only a small splash of water or broth if it needs help softening. Cover the pan briefly, then remove the lid. The lid traps steam during the first stage. Removing it prevents the cabbage from becoming wet and limp. You want softened edges with some life in the centre, not raw, not mush. There is a middle ground. That is where good cabbage lives. If the edges turn dark immediately, the pan is too hot. A little browning can add sweetness. Black or bitter edges mean the heat was too aggressive or the cabbage sat still too long. Move it. Lower the heat. You are cooking dinner, not testing the smoke detector. Microwave cooking deserves a fair look too. Many people believe microwaves destroy all vitamins. That is not how nutrient loss works. Heat, time and water matter more than the name of the appliance. A short microwave cook with very little water can preserve more vitamin C than a long boil. Use a microwave-safe glass container. Add a spoonful or two of water, not a bath. Cover loosely. Cook in short intervals. Stir. Check the texture. Stop while the cabbage is bright and still slightly firm. The microwave can be one of the gentlest methods, precisely because it is fast. The appliance is not the enemy. Overcooking is. And what about pressure cookers? They can be useful because they shorten cooking time, but the margin for error is small. A minute too long under pressure can turn delicate cabbage into paste. Use larger pieces. Use very little liquid. Release pressure promptly when the cooking time ends. Pressure cooking can work, but it demands restraint. For many people, steaming or a covered skillet is easier to control. Soup needs a different strategy. Many recipes add cabbage at the beginning. Then the soup simmers for 40 minutes. By the time it reaches the bowl, the cabbage has lost colour, texture, and most of its personality. Let the broth, meat, beans, potatoes, or root vegetables cook first. Add the cabbage closer to the end. Simmer only until it softens, and because you eat the broth, the water-soluble compounds that moved into the liquid remain part of the meal. This is one reason cabbage soup can still be an excellent dish. The cooking water becomes food. The same principle applies to braised cabbage. Use less liquid than you think. Cabbage releases water as it cooks. If you begin with a cup of broth, then the cabbage releases more moisture. You may accidentally boil it. Start with a splash. You can always add more. It is much harder to remove water after the pan becomes a swamp. Acid can help flavour and colour, especially with red cabbage. A little vinegar or lemon juice can keep the colour more red or magenta. But acid does not make cabbage immune to long cooking. A spoonful of vinegar is not a force field. Use acid for taste. Use timing for preservation. People also ask whether adding baking soda keeps cabbage green. It can brighten green vegetables for a while because it changes the pH, but it also softens plant tissue rapidly and can damage texture. The cabbage may become mushy before you realise what happened. That bright colour can be misleading. A better method is shorter cooking, less water, and immediate serving. Do not use chemistry to hide overcooking. Red cabbage gives the clearest visual lesson. Its purple colour comes from pigments called anthocyanins. These pigments react to acidity. In an acidic environment, the colour shifts toward red or magenta. In a less acidic environment, it may look more blue or purple. That is why red cabbage appears in school science experiments. But the pigments are also affected by water and heat. Boil red cabbage for a long time and much of the colour moves into the liquid. Steam it or saute it briefly and more colour stays in the vegetable. Colour is not a perfect laboratory measurement. Bright cabbage does not guarantee that every compound survived, but dull colour and long cooking are strong clues that the process went farther than necessary. Another common mistake happens after dinner: repeated reheating. You cook a large pot on Sunday, you heat the whole pot on Monday, again on Tuesday, again on Wednesday. Each cycle adds more heat. The cabbage becomes softer, wetter, and flatter in flavour. Store leftovers promptly in the refrigerator, then reheat only the portion you plan to eat. Do not bring the entire pot back to a boil every day. This keeps the texture better and avoids unnecessary repeated heating. If you wear dentures, have dental work, or simply prefer softer food, use thin, even slices and add a small amount of liquid. The cabbage can become tender without becoming lifeless. A covered skillet over medium heat often works better than a hard boil. The trapped steam softens the fibres. Then, removing the lid lets excess moisture escape. This gives you a texture that is soft enough to chew, but still pleasant. That middle texture is especially useful for older adults because it respects both comfort and nutrition. Texture matters more after 50 than many food videos admit. Teeth may be more sensitive, chewing may be slower. The digestive system may not welcome a mountain of raw cabbage. That does not mean the only alternative is cooking it until it dissolves. Steam it until tender, cut it smaller, sauté it briefly. Chew it well. Begin with a modest portion. Your body does not award medals for suffering through a mixing bowl of raw slaw. A useful food is one you can eat comfortably. Gas is another reason people avoid cabbage. Cabbage contains fibre and fermentable carbohydrates that gut bacteria can use. For some people, especially those who do not regularly eat vegetables, that process may produce gas and bloating. Cooking may make cabbage easier to handle. Portion size matters too. A few forkfuls are different from half a serving bowl. Start smaller, increase gradually. Look at the whole meal. Cabbage, beans, onions, and a large dessert in one sitting may create a very different evening than cabbage served with fish, potatoes, and herbs. Traditional seasonings such as caraway, fennel, dill, coriander, ginger, and mustard are often paired with cabbage because they improve flavour. Do not treat them as guaranteed cures for gas. They are culinary tools. That is enough. If herbs make cabbage pleasant enough to eat regularly, they have already done something useful. There is also a popular claim that raw cabbage is always better. That is too simple. Raw cabbage preserves heat-sensitive compounds and active plant enzymes. Cooked cabbage may be easier to chew and digest. It may fit more naturally into soups, skillet meals, and warm side dishes. The best choice may be both. A small raw slaw at lunch, lightly steamed cabbage at dinner, fermented cabbage occasionally if the sodium level fits your needs. Different methods offer different advantages. Food does not need one winner. It needs a place in your routine. Cabbage also does not cure cancer, heal every ulcer, or replace medical care. Those claims take a good vegetable and turn it into bad information. Cabbage provides fibre, vitamin C, folate, vitamin K, and several plant compounds. Eating it as part of a varied diet can support general health. That is already valuable. A vegetable does not need to perform miracles to deserve space on the plate. One more herb deserves attention: dill seed. Fresh dill gives a bright finish, but dill seed is warmer and more concentrated. It works well in soups, braised cabbage, and pickled style dishes. Bay leaf can also be useful in soup or braising liquid, but remove it before serving. Garlic is best handled with care. If you add it too early over high heat, it can turn bitter. Add it during the middle of cooking or near the end, depending on the dish. Ginger pairs especially well with Napa cabbage and bok choy. It gives warmth without requiring heavy sauce. These details may sound small, but small flavour choices determine whether healthy food becomes a habit or a one-time experiment. Coleslaw creates a completely different problem. Because the cabbage stays raw, heat is not the issue. The issue becomes what surrounds it. A cup of shredded cabbage can be light and crisp. Add a heavy dressing made with several tablespoons of mayonnaise, sugar, and a lot of salt, and the nutritional story changes quickly. That does not mean coleslaw is bad. It means the dressing matters. A lighter version can use plain yogurt, a little mustard, vinegar, lemon, herbs, and a small amount of olive oil. Celery seed works beautifully here, so does dill. A little apple can add sweetness without turning the bowl into dessert. If raw cabbage bothers your stomach, let the dressed slaw sit briefly so the acid and salt soften the leaves. Or mix raw cabbage with lightly steamed cabbage for a gentler texture. There is no rule that says coleslaw must be completely raw or buried under dressing. Roasting is another popular method, especially in American kitchens. Cut the cabbage into wedges, brush them lightly with oil, place them on a sheet pan. The edges brown. The natural sweetness becomes more noticeable. For someone who thinks cabbage is boring, roasting can completely change the experience. But roasting has its own trap. If the wedges are too thin, the outer leaves burn before the centre softens. If the oven is extremely hot and the cabbage stays in too long, the outside becomes bitter while the inside dries out. Use thick, even wedges. Keep part of the core attached so the leaves stay together. Use enough oil to prevent dryness, but not so much that the sheet pan becomes greasy. Check before the recipe says you should. Recipes cannot see your oven. Some ovens run hot. Dark sheet pans brown food faster. Fresh cabbage contains more moisture than a head that has been sitting in the refrigerator for 2 weeks. When the edges are browned and the centre is tender enough to pierce with a fork, stop. Then add lemon, herbs, or mustard after roasting. That final step restores freshness that long dry heat can flatten. Roasting will not preserve every heat-sensitive compound as well as a short steam, but it may help someone eat cabbage who would otherwise avoid it. That trade-off matters. Nutrition is not only about what survives on paper, it is also about what reaches the plate and gets eaten. The slow cooker deserves a warning too. It is convenient, it is familiar, and it is very easy to leave cabbage inside for far too long. If cabbage goes into a slow cooker at the beginning of an 8-hour recipe, it may be soft beyond recognition by dinner. Add it later. Let the meat, beans or root vegetables cook first. Add the cabbage during the final portion of cooking so it softens without dissolving. This one change can improve the colour, texture and flavour immediately. The slow cooker is not the problem. Timing is. Storage affects the result before cooking begins. Choose a head that feels heavy for its size. The leaves should feel firm. The cut stem should not look excessively dry, cracked or dark. Loose outer leaves are not always a problem, but sliminess, strong sour odour or wet soft spots are reasons to choose another head. At home, keep the whole cabbage cold. Do not wash the entire head before storage unless you can dry it well. Moisture trapped around the leaves can speed spoilage. Once cut, wrap the remaining piece and refrigerate it. Use it while the texture is still crisp. Cabbage lasts longer than delicate lettuce, which is one reason it became such a dependable household vegetable. But lasting longer does not mean improving forever. Vitamin levels, moisture, and texture change during storage. A fresher cabbage gives you a better starting point. Frozen cabbage is useful too, but it behaves differently. Freezing breaks plant cells. When the cabbage thaws, it becomes softer and releases more water. That makes it less appealing for slaw, but it works in soup, stew, braised dishes, or casseroles. If you freeze cabbage, use it where softness is helpful. Do not expect thawed leaves to behave like a fresh, crisp head. Commercial frozen vegetables are often blanched before freezing. That short heat treatment helps control enzymes that would otherwise damage quality during storage. It also means the cabbage has already been heated before it reaches your pan. Cook frozen cabbage only as long as needed. It does not require the same treatment as a dense raw head. There is one more reason not to chase perfect nutrient preservation. Cooking changes more than vitamins. It changes flavour. It changes texture. It may improve the availability of some compounds while reducing others. It may make the vegetable easier to eat in a useful amount. Food chemistry is full of trade-offs. That is why cooking destroys all the benefits is as misleading as boiling cabbage for half an hour. The truth sits between those extremes. Gentler cooking preserves more. Good herbs make the dish enjoyable. A sensible portion makes it repeatable. And a varied diet means one vegetable does not have to carry your entire health. Even the type of cabbage changes the method. Green cabbage is dense and slightly peppery. Red cabbage holds its shape and carries colourful anthocyanins. Savoy cabbage has crinkled leaves and softens quickly. Napa cabbage is delicate and needs little heat. Bok choy belongs to the same broad cruciferous family and cooks even faster. Using one cooking time for all of them makes no sense. Treat delicate leaves like delicate leaves. Treat dense wedges like dense wedges. If you cook Napa cabbage as long as a thick green cabbage wedge, it may disappear into the pan. If you steam a dense wedge for the same time as shredded Napa, the centre may remain raw. The vegetable tells you what it needs through thickness, moisture, and texture. Your job is to notice. Taste is useful information too. Bitter, sulphurous, flat cabbage usually tells you the process went too far. Fresh sweetness, a mild peppery note, and a clean herbal finish tell you the dish still has balance. Taste before adding sugar. Many old recipes use sugar because overcooked cabbage has lost sweetness and developed stronger sulphur notes. If you cook it briefly and use apple, onion, carrot, or a little balsamic vinegar, you may need much less sugar. The same applies to salt. Herbs, acid, toasted seeds, and a modest amount of fat create flavour without turning the dish into a sodium delivery system. For Americans over 50 who are watching blood pressure, that matters. Cabbage itself is naturally low in sodium. The salt often arrives through bacon, bouillon cubes, bottled sauces, seasoning packets, cheese, or heavily salted fermented products. The vegetable may be innocent, the company it keeps may not be. Now we are close to the finishing trick I promised. But first, let us solve one more problem: boiled cabbage leaves for rolls. Many people boil the entire head until the leaves become soft enough to separate. By the time the inner leaves loosen, the outer layers are overcooked. A gentler method is to remove the core and place the cabbage in simmering water. As each outer leaf softens, Peel it away with tongs. Do not wait for the whole head to collapse. Remove one leaf at a time. Save the cooking liquid if you can use it in the sauce or soup. Another option is to freeze the whole head, then thaw it. Freezing softens the leaves and can make them easier to roll, though the texture changes and the method requires planning. The point is the same. Do not keep cooking every leaf because the centre is still firm. Treat the layers individually. The same idea works with blanching. Blanching means brief contact with boiling water, followed by cooling. It can soften cabbage without long cooking, but brief matters. If the cabbage stays in boiling water for 10 or 15 minutes, that is no longer blanching, that is boiling with a fancy name. There is one last kitchen habit that quietly works against you. Cooking cabbage first and seasoning it much later with only salt. Cabbage needs contrast. A little acidity wakes it up. Fresh herbs restore aroma after heat. Toasted seeds add depth. A small amount of mustard brings sharpness. When flavour is built this way, you do not need to rely on sugar, excess butter, or bottled sauce. This is especially useful for people over 50 who are trying to reduce sodium without eating bland food. Try tasting the cabbage in layers. First, taste it plain after cooking. Then add a squeeze of lemon. Taste again. Add dill or parsley. Taste again. Then decide whether it actually needs more salt. Most people season by habit. Tasting in stages teaches you what the food is missing. Sometimes it needs salt. Sometimes it needs acid. Sometimes it simply needed to come off the heat 5 minutes earlier. That is the kind of kitchen skill no supplement can replace. Now, let us bring the whole method together. Take a fresh cabbage. Remove damaged outer leaves. Cut only what you plan to use. Slice it evenly. Then allow the cut cabbage to rest briefly while you prepare the pan and seasonings. Warm a wide skillet over medium heat. Add a small amount of olive oil or butter. If you like caraway, coriander, fennel or mustard seed, warm a small amount until the aroma rises. Add the cabbage. Toss it. Add a splash of water or broth. Cover briefly. Then remove the lid and cook only until the cabbage becomes tender with a slight bite. Turn off the heat. Now add the fresh herbs. Dill, parsley, thyme leaves, a little lemon juice, maybe a spoonful of mustard. And here is the finishing trick. If cabbage has been thoroughly heated, adding a small amount of raw mustard, mustard powder, radish or arugula after cooking may provide active myrosinase from another cruciferous plant. Why does that matter? Strong heat can reduce the natural myrosinase activity inside the cabbage. Raw mustard and radish contain their own myrosinase. Researchers have studied this idea most clearly with cooked broccoli, where adding an active source of the enzyme can support the formation of certain compounds from glucosinolates. We should not pretend that a spoonful of mustard turns overcooked cabbage into medicine. It does not. But as a kitchen technique, it makes sense. It adds flavour. It fits the plant chemistry. And it gives you another reason to finish the dish after the heat is off. Use plain mustard with a short ingredient list. Or mix a small pinch of mustard powder into a dressing. Or add thin slices of fresh radish. Or toss a handful of arugula into the warm cabbage before serving. Choose one. This is dinner, not a laboratory competition. The central method is still simple. Cut evenly, pause briefly, use little water, cook for less time, finish with herbs, acid and a small amount of raw mustard or another fresh crucifer if you enjoy it. That is the system. Notice what is missing. No expensive supplement, no special machine, no fear of cooked food, no demand that you eat raw cabbage before breakfast. Just better timing. Imagine 2 pans. In the first, cabbage boils for 30 minutes. The water is discarded. The cabbage is pale, soft and tired. In the second, Evenly sliced cabbage rests while the seeds warm in a skillet. It steams for a few minutes, keeps its colour, and finishes with dill, lemon and mustard. Same vegetable, different treatment. That is why cooking skill matters. You are not creating nutrients from nothing. You are deciding how much unnecessary damage to avoid. Here are several combinations that work especially well. Green cabbage with caraway, butter and parsley. Red cabbage with apple, vinegar and thyme. Savoy cabbage with garlic, olive oil and lemon. Napa cabbage with ginger and sesame. Steamed cabbage with dill and mustard dressing. Roasted cabbage with rosemary and a squeeze of lemon. Cabbage soup with the cabbage added near the end. These are not medical prescriptions. They are practical ways to make gentle cooking taste good enough to repeat. And repetition matters. Eating cabbage once after watching a video will not transform your health. Eating vegetables regularly, prepared in a way you enjoy, builds the habit. So the next time you hold a head of cabbage over the cutting board, remember what is happening. The knife opens the cells. The short rest gives the plant enzymes time to interact. The cooking method decides whether the cabbage is gently softened or aggressively stripped. The liquid decides whether dissolved compounds remain in the meal or go down the drain. The final herbs and mustard decide whether the dish tastes alive. You do not need perfection. Some vitamin C will be lost during cooking. Some enzyme activity will decrease. That is normal. The goal is not to preserve 100% of every molecule. The goal is to stop losing more than necessary. If you prefer raw cabbage and tolerate it, enjoy it. If you need it softer, cook it gently. If you make soup, keep the broth. If you saute, use a wide pan and stop early. If you roast, use thick wedges and check before they burn. If you reheat leftovers, heat only the serving you need. That is how you preserve more value without turning dinner into a chemistry exam. One simple habit can make all of this easier. Cook cabbage in smaller batches. A smaller amount heats more evenly. It is easier to toss. It releases steam faster, and you can stop at the right moment instead of waiting for a crowded pan to catch up. If you are cooking for 1 or 2 people, there is no need to prepare the entire head at once. Cut what you need, wrap the rest. Use it later for soup, slaw, or another quick skillet meal. This keeps the texture fresher and reduces repeated reheating. It also gives you variety. One cabbage can become 3 different meals instead of one giant pot you are tired of by Wednesday. That is practical cooking. Not wasteful, not complicated, just smarter. And do not let a dramatic headline make you afraid of food. You have not destroyed your health because you boiled cabbage. You simply have a better method now, better timing, better texture, better flavour. Write in the comments how you usually prepare cabbage. Boiled, sautéed, steamed, roasted, fermented or raw. And if you want a separate video about sauerkraut, how to choose it, how much sodium it may contain, and why heating changes the live cultures, write cabbage in the comments. Subscribe for practical herbal and food guidance without miracle claims, kitchen myths, or vegetables cooked until they lose the will to live. The next head of cabbage does not need more heat, it needs better timing.